Oh, sorry. Did he claw you?
No, you squished my toe.
I squished his toe. Is the flickering light from the TV good, or should I put the main light on?
Possibly put the main light on, because I'm thinking the moment we get a dark
dark video,
we'll suddenly just disappear.
Like, oh, where have we gone? It's like some weird ass game of Where's Wally? Here he is. Oh yeah, that looks much better. So we are going to talk about It's a Sin, and we've seen the whole thing. I guess we should try to not be too spoiler. I don't know if we can though. I don't know if you can really talk about what you think about it without going too funny at the end.
I think it's safe to say, as with all of our videos, if you're watching this, spoilers ahead. With the best will in the world, there will be things that we probably talk about.
Yeah, I think things are just going to come up. Just don't wait till you've seen the whole show and then come back. 5 episodes, so come back then. I think. So my first thought is my stupid one, which is 2 years ago, Russell T Davies had a show on called Years and Years. Years and Years are a band. The lead singer is Ollie Alexander, who is the main character in It's a Sin. In 2 years' time, is there going to be a show where the main character is played by Neil Tennant or Chris Lowe?
Why Neil Tennant? Oh, of course, yeah. I, for some reason, whenever you say Tennant, I just think David Tennant.
Yeah, no, Neil Tennant.
Yeah, that's
off
what was,
of Pet Shop Boys.
That's what was throwing me.
Off of the record, It's a Sin.
We're just like, why would he be doing something that involves like the former Doctor?
Well, he might do. He might do. He's had him in Casanova and in Doctor Who. Which reminds me, we've also got a stage series too, but that's by the by.
Yes.
So we've binged this series over 2 days. 2 days? Yeah, 2 days.
Yes, we watched 3 episodes
yesterday
last night.
and 2 today. And my main thought on it is, as a piece of TV drama, I think it's great. I think the performances in certain areas are outstanding. Nice local boy in it too, in Callum Scott Howe. So he's from the same small town where I do pantos and things. So that's cool. And a couple of the people I know through that theatre know him, so that's nice. My friend Nathan is in it briefly for a couple of episodes. I think it's bumped off, but and so what was I talking about?
As a piece of drama.
Thank you. So as a piece of actual
basic drama,
TV drama,
independent of anything else,
that it's representing, yes. I don't think you can say you enjoyed it. I don't think it's that kind of show.
No,
it's like
not that
it's like you don't enjoy going to a funeral, but you'll come away going, oh yeah, it was nice, it was good.
It was cathartic. I believe is the expression they tend to use for that.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
I've never used that about a funeral. I normally come away from a funeral going, yeah, I couldn't stop laughing. But that probably says more about me.
Or possibly the people that you've been burying.
Yeah, I think it's a whole thing with my nan. Me and my nan used to just laugh at funerals, and I was really pissed off because I wasn't laughing at her funeral until a certain point. And then I howled with laughter, and I was like, now this is my nan's funeral. If you're going to have a vicar with a false arm, I'm going to laugh. So it's so from that score, yes. From a truly representational view of the time, set over 10 years, no, unless you're a white gay man who's out on the gay scene. But I can remember when Queer as Folk first came out, and I had a lot of I would never take away from Queer as Folk what it did just for lots of things, for TV, for gay people in general, stuff like that. But a lot of my straight friends didn't fully understand the lifestyle, if you like, and I got lots of texts because it was the very, very early days of mobiles when that came out, and it was like, oh my god, is this what your life's really like? And I was like, no, actually it really isn't. But I know people who are the go out 3-4 nights a week people, and for them, yes, it is. But do not tar us all with the same fucking brush. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's a pocket of people this would be probably relevant and accurate for. The people who lived in the big cities, and did lead the clubbing lifestyle, going out to heaven and wherever else.
Or mainly just heaven, based on
that
TV show.
Which I think, again, moving into the mid-90s, for my friends, it was heaven or the fridge. And the people who lived in London tend to go to heaven, and the people who went into London tend to go to fridge. So that was, is what it was. And it's funny because this ends obviously then in 1991, just prior to when I came out and started going to gay bars, because I started doing that in 93. So it kind of almost ends as my experience began.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were certain scenes, like there's one scene, I think it's the first scene where Ollie Alexander's character, Richie Tozer, who is, I'm fairly certain, the name of one of the kids in It by Stephen King, actually.
That's right, I meant to Google that, but never got around to it.
Yeah, I'm 99% certain. But there's a bit where he walks through a pub, and it's one of the first times he's really comfortable going out. I think it might be in episode 2. And I watched that and went, yeah, I remember that moment for me, the first time I was kind of beyond the sort of like in the corner and sort of would get my drink and walk through the bar. Hey, you all right? Yeah, you right? How you doing, mate? You okay? We weren't all a bit hey girl hey back then. Odd people were, not as in they were odd, as in the odd person, but generally that wasn't the behaviour I just said. That's sort of become a thing in recent years. So there were moments, and I liked that. The one thing that did completely stand out, there was the scene where 3 of the characters, who are the Slut Horse of Babylon, all go for their HIV test together. And one guy who's sort of like the more average guy in the group, if you like, gets his negative result, and then the next guy gets his negative result and just turns around and says, "Oh my god, I fucked everybody. That's not fair, is it?"
Yeah, that was Roscoe, I think.
Yeah, I was trying not to lead into the character names. And then there's a later on reveal about Richie and doing his result. But I thought, yeah, that's absolutely true to my experience. It's not fair. It really isn't. And that's the thing. And obviously, and we'll come on to it a bit more later. But then, for the common or garden casual viewer who will pick this up on Channel 4, who may not have gay people in their life, there was then nothing to say, actually, post 1991, this is what happened, and the world isn't like that anymore, and the virus isn't like that anymore, and treatment isn't like that anymore. So it kind of, if you don't know things have changed, it doesn't do anything to tell you that. And I think that's a humongous fucking ball drop, because I think it's just going to bring back a ton of old stereotypes and reinforcements. I mean, look at some of the attitudes you still get, particularly around here where we live, that's quite insular and colloquial. I can imagine sort of some of the people watching it and going, and not making the connection of the next 20 years to come up to now. I think that's my biggest problem with it. I just think it needed that. Really think it did. Like I said, as a piece of drama, fine. As long as you accept that there weren't really lesbians and there weren't really trans people, and gays only behave one way.
I think that's the thing, because we watched the final episode probably about half an hour or so ago.
Yeah, now? Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. And I basically I went and had a cigarette because I ended it feeling really angry, and I couldn't kind of process why, and feeling very conflicted about the whole thing. So, because obviously Paul had posted something on Facebook about how the show seems to be absolutely dividing people, and obviously made reference to he's had some oh my god, this is amazing, this is the best thing on TV I've seen in a long time type responses. but had also had completely the opposite response, but nothing in between. And that the majority of people were kind of going for the "it's amazing" versus the sort of setup. And I was even going into this. I thought I'd be quite curious to read it, but I didn't want to kind of read anything about it until I'd watched the program myself. But obviously, feeling the way I was feeling at the end of it, it was just like, So Paul very kindly showed me that person. I've actually commented on the thread as well. So I've tagged sort of the person who left it, because basically they completely articulated every issue that I think I had with it, that left me feeling the way it felt. And it's exactly what Paul was saying. It's just like, where are the trans people in this? Where are the lesbians in this? You know, especially at the time, because that's one thing I remember. Because I think that's the other thing as well that's probably important to remember for our viewers, is that for this time period, we kind of avoided this because we were at the age where we were like literally just starting to go into our teen years. So yes, we've grown up with the whole gay plague thing, and you know, when it was first breaking in the States, and you had all the stuff about patient zero and the uncertainty about how it was transmitted and all of that sort of stuff. But it absolutely probably didn't affect us as directly as it's shown to affect obviously the characters in the drama, because they were just like, you know, that 5-10 years ahead of us in the curve, so they were already kind of out there. But obviously, you know, we've grown up, you know, having that spectre hanging over our heads in various ways, shapes and forms. And you know, I remember the Tombstone Iceberg advert. I remember it being, at the time, absolutely terrifying. I remember things like Clause 28. You know, remember all of the attitudes, like, you know, you don't share toilet seats with people that you know are gay because you know, you'll catch and it was always, you'll catch the AIDS from them. Yeah. It was another tool to kind of separate people.
I lived in that environment. I lived in no, fuck it. This needs to be said. I lived in a family that basically made me feel that I was going to grow up and I wasn't going to see 2021 because I was going to die of AIDS, because I knew on the inside that I like boys. That's how I felt at home in 1984, 85. And it was fucking hard. I can't lie. You know, it still breaks me to think about it this day. I can remember being in car journeys with my dad, and him. He's got a certain way he talks. He's not talking angrily at all, but he talks angry. It's just kind of weird. You know what I mean with my dad, don't you?
Oh yeah.
And you know, Dad, if you watch this, you know, I get it. It's 30 years ago. We've both changed a lot. Don't worry about it. Please don't be upset. But he used to be, it's to kill the fucking puffs. Yeah, they're all gonna get it. Look at the amount of fucking I do. I've not got it. And I used to sit next to him and think, what am I gonna do? What the hell am I gonna do with my life? Because I know, I don't know, and you know, and there wasn't an end in sight at the moment. Do you know what I mean? So, and then I look on. And I think I say this in my book, which incidentally, if you're interested in reading my book, it's called Pornobiography and it's on Amazon. But it is, it kind of follows on, because it picks up more or less where it overlaps with It's a Sin, actually, thinking about it mildly. And then it's like a 30-year period of me being an absolute slut. No two ways about it. And I say in there, and again, it comes back to the not fair thing, I have no right to be HIV negative. I took risk after risk after risk. I have zero fucking right. And I, you know, thank my lucky stars, I guess. But, you know, and again, these days, I always say, I kind of, it's not technically that accurate a description, but I think you'll kind of get what I'm going, and if I say something offensive now, he'll tell you. But to me, HIV is kind of like diabetes. It's a condition that you just medicate, and yes, it's preventable and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But you know that it's not as simple as that. Clearly, it's not. But I think you kind of get where I'm going with it.
I think the important thing for that is, because obviously I'll come back to sort of what I was just saying sort of earlier, and that's the thing, because I mean, obviously, we grew up in a time where it was the gay plague, and yet you had so many parallels with what was going on back then with some of the stuff we've seen now with COVID-19, which is it's manufactured, it's targeted, it's this, it's that. It's a punishment for
it's from
X.
space.
Yeah. But at the time it was very much it was this weird thing. It was targeting the queers. It was targeting intravenous drug users. It was basically targeting the undesirables of society at the time, and no one knew how it was transmitted. So again, you had all the things which again the show kind of touched on, but not enough, I think, for my personal liking it as a like sort of docu-reference for that time period for future generations. With people having to wear masks and everything because they didn't know whether it was aerosol and all of that sort of stuff. And obviously as time has progressed and we learned more about sort of the disease, and it was passed on through bodily contact and very specific forms of bodily contact, and obviously how as things have progressed with the medication, where it's now got to the stage where it is basically more like a chronic condition. It's not the death sentence that it was initially portrayed to be back in the 80s and 90s when it was like at the height of media interest is probably the way to put that, to look at it, because it's kind of and this is probably going to sound horrible, and again I don't have any basis, in fact this is just my personal opinion, but I think as it became more weirdly accepted that it didn't discriminate itself, if you engaged in X relevant behavior, you were putting yourself at risk of becoming HIV positive, and that didn't matter whether you were gay, straight, bi, male, female, non-binary, although again that wasn't really talked about as being a thing back then. Whether you were a drug user, someone who the big scandal that broke with the whole contaminated blood thing for I think both here and in the States and probably throughout the world. The moment it became, I think, more societally accepted that anyone could get it if you had the right combination of factors and elements, it kind of then dropped out of the media spotlight, because suddenly it just became a bit like I fully expect COVID-19 will, because I think it will go the same way that swine flu did a few years back, that bird flu did a few years back, that SARS did a couple of years ago, where the moment it's not such a big deal and running out of control and people don't know how to deal with it, it's media worthy. Once it stops being media worthy, it kind of falls out of the public consciousness. And I think that's, again, linking to what you were saying sort of earlier, that's where this show for me massively drops the ball at the end, which is that yes, it's very much about a period of time, sort of 81 to 91 essentially. And yes, that was the big sort of explosion of this virus globally, and all of the appalling sort of societal stuff that came as a result of that. But over the sort of the 30 years since that, incrementally things have improved. From a treatment perspective, I mean, I'm not going to talk about sort of again how sort of people in sort of underrepresented groups like sort of trans people are again disproportionately sort of affected by sort of recognition of the impact this sort of stuff has had on sort of the community. But just in terms of the basic treatment side of things and the basic understanding of how the virus works, we have come so far, and to not give even just a blurb at the end, and this may be
just a card, a title card.
I mean, it could be because we've kind of watched this on catch up, so when it's actually broadcast, it may be completely different. When they actually officially show what episode 5 and whatever it's going to be, end of Feb, I think is officially going to be broadcast.
Yeah, well, episode 1 was Friday just gone, so yeah.
So they may very well do that when it's actually on sort of non-demand
I doubt
TV.
it. This will be the signed off final version.
But they should have put something up there to basically say, and you can even do it like a lot of shows do, where they talk about, throughout this period of time, these are the number of people that, were. I think that the American film, I want to say, had Richard Gere in it as a doctor. I can't remember what it was called. If you can remember, please put the comment in, because it was actually a really good film about the AIDS crisis mainly from an American perspective. But it's one of those typical Hollywood ones that had lots of big names in it, doing like lots of little sort of parts, and it was about tracking the efforts of people like this, the CDC and various, sort of doctors around the world, all that sort of thing. But they do. There's a very good scene at the end where you've got like the three characters who've kind of gone through the whole thing, and it ends on the beach, and literally what you have is they just have that reminiscence moment, and what you basically get is just this crowd of people that kind of run past them, and that crowd of people is basically a representation of every person that they've lost throughout that movie, that's basically been taken by sort of the AIDS crisis throughout the 80s and sort of early 90s.
I think I've seen this.
It's a very poignant moment. It's very of its time. I haven't watched it back in the 20 or 30 odd years since it was made, so I may look at it very differently now and just think, ooh. Yeah. But they needed something like that for this. They needed to combat that. They were going for a visceral gut punch with a lot of the shots in this, and again, I think that's an issue for me, that some of it was it was horrific, but it was kind of almost played for sensationalism. And yes, I know in a lot of cases that is what it was like, but it kind of misses some of the supporting stuff around it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's something as simple as, in 1991 in the UK, XYZ people lost the battle to AIDS. In 2020, give the updated number. Because I think the contrast will speak volumes.
Yeah, and also I think just doing that update in terms of,
actually perhaps not 2020, because you might have COVID complications in
it.
But 2019.
But just actually also looking at our understanding of the sort of the virus now, our understanding of drug treatments now, because again they have various points within the show where they look at some of the certainly obviously in some of the later episodes where it's kind of more understood by that point as an illness, where they look at some of the which we know, having gone through it, how insane some of the drug combinations were, where you're literally taking 10, 15, 20, 30 pills a day, and you're having to take certain pills at certain times, and you take this pill with this pill, but you can't take it with that pill. They very briefly touch on that at one point.
But I think, I mean, we know what that scene means.
Yeah.
Someone who has no experience of that won't, because there was no explanation with it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, obviously, at the same time, you don't want to fucking go play school and go, oh, you're on combination therapy now. Oh, you must take this and this. I get that, but at the same time, say something about it.
Yeah. I think, and this possibly links into one of the things you were saying earlier when you were talking about Queer as Folk, is that I suppose on a very basic level, although this is me being me, would probably be quite concerned if in 2021 people still needed that, the kind of people that would watch this kind of show to begin with, would still need to have that, sort of, oh my god, my eyes have been opened moment, because you would have hoped they would at least have had some understanding by now of some of the issues raised in sort of the show. But I think it probably does raise an element of, yes, this is how bad things were. Again, in a very Russell T Davies, let's just completely ignore these massive subsections of the LGBTQ sort of community that also had to deal with this crisis.
You can't put all those letters in, they weren't in this show.
But
just the G.
But again, it's one of the sort of posts that I've seen on Paul's thread, which actually does raise a really good point, and it kind of touches on, because it's something I remember probably more from the sort of the early 90s, which is when I was kind of reaching the age where I was starting to kind of step out into the gay world, which is basically in terms of the scene, because it was basically you were either on the scene or you weren't LGBTQ for a lot of that sort of community. Was just how key, because I think at that point still it was very much deemed to be a gay and a gay male disease. It was, there was still, I think, a popular perception that women were not an at-risk group. You know, be they sort of straight, gay, or bi. So you had this really weird thing, and it is something that's touched on in the post, which is that sort of, you know, people who identified as lesbian became a key support infrastructure sort of component for people living with HIV and AIDS, because, you know, they were, you know, they were the people that went into hospital and you know, did the buddy system, and, you know, sort of helped staff the, you know, sort of the various switchboards and helplines that were set up, and none of that's touched on. And that actually kind of links me into the thing that really annoyed me, and it's something that Paul's friend sort of highlights as well, which, again, until I read it and sort of had it articulated, was just like, oh my god, yes. The character of Jill in this, who is played brilliantly, I can't remember the actor's name.
No, but she was in Years and Years.
But she was in Years and Years, and she was also one of my favourite characters in Years and Years as well, because she was, I think, very much like the central character that they kind of all sort of fed off in that. Obviously, you know, she is probably the key character, because she is literally the centre that all of the other characters seem to kind of revolve around. And from what I gather from articles I've read, from comments I've read, she is actually based on someone that Russell T Davies knows in real life, you know, who was kind of a key player in his experiences back then. So yeah, on a basic sort of surface read, played brilliantly, you know, very solid character, but literally, who is she as a person? You know, you don't have any indication that she is there as anything other.
Well, you don't know if she's gay, straight, or otherwise.
No,
for a start.
Which, you know, you could make an argument in yourself that
it's not about her.
That it's not about her, and you know, it shouldn't matter, you know, what someone's orientation is. But again, you know, I think this is a drama show kind of drops the ball on that a bit, and does make it very much, because it basically focuses, as we've sort of discussed and complained about, it focuses on gay men. So, you know, it puts the character's sexuality right at the centre of everything. So you don't have any sense of that. You have no sense that she has any kind of social life, romantic life, professional life, for that matter.
Oh no, you're doing that rip-off of Les Mis a couple of times.
Yeah, but that's literally it. And again, you know, one of the sort of the comments made about, you know, that there's no, and yeah, okay, so maybe it's not about sort of other aspects like racism, but you don't see anything that defines her as a person in her own right. It's all how she is in relation to the other characters, and I always think that's a huge failing of any show. If you put someone in and your only understanding of them is what their connection is to another character, they failed as a characterization for me, because you should be able to look at them and go, oh yes, that character would respond like X in this scenario because of how they are as a person, because of their personality, because of their interest, because of their dislike, whatever it may be. There's absolutely none of that with Jill's character. So yes, she has some very poignant moments. She's absolutely, you know, probably the key player throughout the entire run, but she is literally a cipher and a sort of sounding board, I think, for the other characters.
Well, yeah, it's, if you take this as a grown-up gay Peter Pan, she's Wendy.
Okay.
She's just brought in to be mother of them all. That's why Peter takes Wendy to Neverland. The Lost Boys need a mother. He decides they need a mother. So basically, that's kind of.
And he picks Wendy.
And he picks Wendy. Well, because she reads the stories. But anyway, that's. If we go to Peter Pan, I'll be here all night about that. But yeah, the other thing I was a bit intrigued about, and it's not massively important in the scheme of what we've talked about for the last half an hour. But I was really intrigued that everything was apparently fine with the Pink Palace. I was a bit like, well, one of the coroner died.
Yes.
I mean, I kind of suspect, as we've talked about, that like you say, and it's mentioned in the thing, that, you know, people don't, they weren't reported as dying of AIDS or AIDS related or whatever. It was pneumonia, it was cancer, it was whatever it was. So they could have probably swung it and got the insurance payout and been mortgage free on this ridiculously large flat for wherever they were meant to be in London for the money they paid as well. We're like,
Yes.
yeah, that's the most unrealistic thing in this whole show. But you know, that's a dramatic plot device needs must. You know, not really got issue with that. We just thought it was funny. But I was just left wondering at the end. Oh, who gets the deeds to the palace? It was just, probably says
Presumably Jill. 'Cause
I
she was-
assume, yeah, Jill just gets it, and then they
she
all
was
just
the
live there
co-signer on the mortgage.
happily ever after. Blah blah
Or
blah.
not, as the case may be.
Yeah. Oh well, who knows? Because the thing is I was on the loo earlier because that's where I do my best thinking, and I was thinking, oh, so I wonder what Russell will sort of follow this up with the '90s series, and they went, oh no, that's where he started. He's done that. That was Queer as Folk.
Yeah, I actually, funny enough, there's an article I was reading, because another post I saw which obviously referenced how someone had been put off based on some earlier comments, and I just thought, oh God, what's Russell been saying now, sort of thing.
Oh.
So I read an article in GQ, I don't know if it's that, it may actually not be, I think it's possibly linked in to what your friend was saying in terms of how this whole thing is about how he feels he needs to atone for his sin, like it's some kind of personal sort of confessional, so whatever, white people's guilt, move on. But he actually does reference the whole fact that it is basically like, I think the phrase they used in the article was effectively the Skywalker Saga with dicks, which again is probably quite accurate in that it largely brushes aside the other letters in the bloody quilt bag spectrum, but it basically will now start with It's a Sin, goes on to Queer as Folk, and ends with Cucumber.
Yeah, I'm just imagining penis lightsabers. Sorry, lost me there for a second. That's probably would have been done in porn, right? Though must be.
I would imagine.
Must
so.
be. It was kind of hinted at in what's that film with John Ritter, Skin Deep, and the condom scene, the glow in the dark condoms. Anyway, yeah, no, that makes sense because you've got this covering a X period, 10-year period, 81 to 91.
Yeah.
And then you've got Queer as Folk, which
you could argue kind of
it's just generic
90s to early noughties.
Well, yeah, just generic late 90s around that sort of time. And then Cucumber was what, 3 years ago?
Yeah. And you could say again would broadly cover 2010 onwards, really, because again, I don't think there's been a huge major shift in the dynamics of what the social scene is like.
The thing with Cucumber is it was 3 shows, but 2. Because it was Cucumber and Banana. So Cucumber for the grown-ups, Banana for the kids. Not kids. That's weird. As in down with the kids. It wasn't,
as in the 20-somethings.
It wasn't aimed at 9-year-olds. But yeah, it was aimed at 16 to 25s.
Probably the equivalent of the age range of It's a Sin, but just in the new landscape kind of thing.
Yeah.
And again, I suppose, I mean, obviously, we've done a lot of, certainly I've done a lot of bashing of the representation side of it. I probably will sort of say, though, at the end of the day, Russell T Davies is obviously a gay white man of a certain age. He's obviously, comparable to, he's what, a few years older than us? He's what, early 50s?
I think he's probably mid to late 50s these days.
Okay. And I
want to say he was born in 62.
Also, he would be.
Sorry, Russell, if I've just aged you, love.
But I think it's safe to say for me that I'm never that confident or comfortable with, a gay white male, basically writing characters who aren't gay white males at the end of the day. In much the same way that I'm always massively sort of just like, could you not get a trans actor to play a trans character in a play or a show or whatever it might be, or could you not get a lesbian to play, or get a lesbian to write a lesbian character? Cause I'm pretty sure there are plenty of lesbian and bisexual writers out there and screenwriters who have lots of stories.
You could just polish the script edit for you on those characters, I guess.
Yeah, and or even that, it's just like, yes, put the characters in, but that would obviously be the first thing, is yes, put the bloody characters in the first place, so you actually do have some representation. But if you are going to do that, then as I think a lot of people are now increasingly doing, speak to sort of the people that you purport to be representing. and make sure that what you're doing is actually representing them, and not kind of portraying what you think their representation actually is. So yeah, I suppose much as I have bashed Russell for not putting in a lesbian character or a trans character, on the flip side, I'm probably quite glad of that, because I suspect if he had done that, I'd have probably been sat here complaining about how
bad they were written.
Yes. So I think.
Sorry, Russell, you can't win, chicken.
Yeah, I think there is. In all fairness, I think there is an element of damned if you do and damned if you don't. But personally, I think damned if you don't is the worst thing, because we will never know at that point what it could have looked like.
I mean, writers generally write from their own experience, because that's all you can do. So you can push your imagination and push boundaries, but ultimately, I mean, not every writer. I'm sure there's a lot of writers that write for women very well, and they're men, and vice versa, and yada yada yada. One of the criticisms I frequently saw about Stephen Moffat was he couldn't write a decent female character, for example. I'm not sure I agree with that, but it's something that's levelled at him quite a lot. And so obviously Russell has done exactly that. He's written his story his way, about his experience and perception. And I don't think there's any fault in that. I just think, again, that's where the kind of the coders and the explanations just would just add that something that I think is desperately needed in this occasion. I mean, for all we know, Russell might have put them there, and Channel 4 said, "No, you're not doing that." I mean, we don't know. Yeah, it's great piece of drama. Enjoyable isn't a word I would attach to it, because it's not that kind of thing. But I think it's going to. I think it could do as much harm as good.
Yeah. And I'd like to think that it will spark conversations.
Well, we've rabbited on for 37 minutes.
Be they critical conversations like the one that we've just been filming, whether it's like the Facebook sort of posts that have been going on. I think sadly my reality, or my perceived reality, is basically going to be that what it will effectively do is just cement opinions. It's not going to move the needle for the majority of people that would sort of tune in to watch this kind of show, and that it's possibly going to just re-raise the spectre of those sort of years for a lot of people that lived through those years, and it doesn't add anything I think particularly substantive to the story, so to the LGBTQ plus history, if you like, the documentary aspect of our history. And I think they do actually, yes, there is actually, which isn't a massive spoiler, but it's one of the ones that kind of talks about the Clause 28 era, because one of the characters is clearly employed as a teacher and basically gets taken in to the library and is obviously effectively told by his very homophobic sort of work colleague that he has to go through every single book and basically pull all of the books that could be perceived to be promoting the homosexual lifestyle in any way, shape or form. And it's written as this this brilliant sort of portrayal of there is literally I've read Shakespeare, I've read this, and lists off sort of.
It's a very Russell monologue.
It is a very Russell monologue, but it's probably one of the few, for me, effective monologues in there.
I laughed
because it makes the point that for a very probably 99.9% of sort of documented cultural history and history full stop, it's completely straight washed.
Yeah.
You will not. You'll get the odd reference to Alexander the Great, having sort of male friends, sort of thing, and that's the thing. And I've seen it with sort of a lot of historians, especially male historians, when they talk about sort of female historical figures who had very close female friends, where it's blatantly obvious they are.
Go and watch The Favourite.
Yeah. So,
I like it when she puts her tongue inside me.
Yeah. So it's that was a very good sort of example of what a show like this, I think, should be fighting against. I just don't think within its own narrative it did a particularly good job of that.
So, what did you think?
Yes. Comment below.